Does the ongoing insurgency in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique pose a threat to the stability in the SADC region? And what does South Africa's United Nations Ambassador Jerry Matjila point to as strides as the country's two-year non-permanent membership of the United Nations Security Council comes to an end? Good evening, I'm Aldrin Simpier, and this is African Perspective. And we start off here. South Africa assumed the presidency of the United Nations Security Council this week, taking the helm of the most powerful UN organ, where it will complete its two-year term at the end of December. The country's envoy says they've sought to build consensus in the council despite complexities of conflicts on its agenda. Pretoria has used its term to foster a closer linkage between the United Nations and the African Union, tried to re-envision the Council's inability to move the Palestinian cause closer to a resolution while finding its voice amid competing interests that continue to raise serious questions about the body's declining legitimacy. SABC Correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease was in conversation with the South African ambassador to the United Nations, Jerry Matjila, in New York.
Ambassador Matjila, it's always good to see you. Thank you for speaking with me.
Thank you so much, Sherwin, for giving us a chance to communicate with South Africans.
Ambassador, you enter your final month of a two-year term on the Council as President of the UN's most powerful organ. What have the last 23 months taught you about this Council and its effectiveness in the context of 2020?
The issue is that we came to the Council understanding its complexity, but we had a well-defined strategy on dealing with this Council. Part of that strategy was to do our very best to create consensus among the Council members and build what we call A3+1, the three African members of the Council and simply the Grenadines from the Caribbean. So we brought African Caribbean together to create a bit of critical mass so that as we implement and roll out our strategy around the rubric of leaving the legacy of President Nelson Mandela, negotiation, peace building, the issue of reconciliations, facilitation of peace, to try to move as many conflicts as we can in the African continent towards resolution. We came in, there was a crisis in CAR. We said, let's move CAR towards the elections. We came in, there was a stalemate in South Sudan. We said, look, let's do our level best to bring South Sudanese back and take them to the root of reconciliation and restore that country. We came back in the middle of the chaos in Sudan. We said, let's partner with the AU, make efforts in the AU and IGAD, and help South Sudanese to come together and create a pathway to the future. And you see the transition government in Sudan. So there's a crisis in Somalia, there's a crisis in, and there was stalemate in Guinea-Bissau. So we look at this conflict and say the best we can do in 2 years, because we are just there for 2 years, is to try to move this conflict towards a resolution in the context of silencing the gun in the African continent. So that was our strategy. And we pursued that relentlessly, diplomatically, building bridges in the way, navigating the landmines in the Security Council, and to make sure that we are, particularly the DRC. You remember when we came in, there was an issue of election in the DRC. We said to the Council members, what we need to do is to give the confidence to the political structures and people of the DRC. They had elections. It may not be perfect, but let's help them to build peace. No blood on the floor. Let's accept these elections and gradually help them to rebuild state machinery. As we talk today, we move peace from the west towards the east. Only 3 states are left in the DRC. So this is a very, very conscious, coordinated decision. The second part was to take as many countries from Africa as possible out of the Agenda Security Council and employ the sub-regional organization to assist these countries and give content to Chapter 8 of the Charter of the United Nations, the AU, sub-regional organization, to fortify these countries through sub-region. Now, I think we will be, during our presidency, we'll be taking Burundi out of the Security Council agenda. So we have managed to roll out. Of course, there's been very difficulties, but diplomats always build bridges. Diplomats always don't lose sight of the objective of peace and security.
I mean, just from that response, Ambassador, one gets a sense that this is a well-functioning 15-body member that's making progress in terms of all the various files, particularly in the African context. And you and I both know that that's not the case. This is a council that has credibility issues, whether you're talking about Western Sahara, whether you're talking about the Palestinian question, many others. So I was trying to get a sense of what this 23 months, has taught South Africa about the council as an institution.
One of the lessons, as I said, is no, you are only there for 2 years. You'll be out of 2 years. So you cannot change the world in 2 years, but you can make some impactful decisions and programs to try to contribute towards global peace and security. Mindful that some of these conflicts are well-rooted, complex, and there are so many players in this, especially in Africa. So, as I say, our role was to say to the president, to the cabinet, to the AU Peace and Security Council, to the A3+1, let's close ranks and just make sure that in 2 years of our tenure, we make a difference. Second one, even if you don't complete resolution of these conflicts, but they should be in some path towards a hopeful resolution, especially towards elections, towards nation building, etc., etc. We will not complete the tension in the council. We were there 2007 and 8. We were there 2011, 2012. It's still the tense council, especially as some governments are changing. And then you have all these reversals of policies or policy adjustments. So you need to adjust in that. And this is going to be the role we'll be playing in December to make sure that whatever happens, we steady the council, especially you see the second week is an Africa week. We will deal with those issues and move the African issues towards resolution.
Let me ask you about some of those African issues, right? I want to touch on Ethiopia because it's the most relevant right now in terms of situations that are developing on the ground. Tens of thousands of refugees fleeing over the border, concerns from various stakeholders that this could easily have regional implications in the entire Horn of Africa region, a historically unstable region that everybody is aware of. And yet we don't see the level of movement that so many have expected from the Council. Why is that, Ambassador?
Well, part of this, first let us say, there was very unfortunate development in Ethiopia. But as soon as the President of South Africa, His Excellency Matamela, Cyril Ramaphosa, announced that he has put a handle around the issue. He's going to send a high-level envoys of His Excellency Joaquim Alberto Chissano, of former President of Mozambique, former President of South Africa, Motlande, and Her Excellency Ellen Sirleaf Johnson, former President of Liberia, to Ethiopia. We knew at the Council this is a serious thing. When the President dispatched such high-level and unique composition of envoys, it means Africa have understood the gravity of the situation. So normally, as we do as diplomats, we give over to our leaders. It is in their hands. They've went there. They met Her Excellency, the President of Ethiopia, Sahle-Work, Sweden. They met His Excellency Dr. Abiy Mohammed, the Prime Minister. They've conveyed the concerns of Africa, the concerns on the world on what is happening there. We are conscious that the problem affects the neighborhood. And that's why we were slightly encouraged when you saw the IGAD member state, President Museveni of Uganda, Prime Minister Hamdok, and other leaders in that region talking with their brothers and sisters in Ethiopia to say, handle it differently. So the Council is waiting now We, A3+1, were waiting for the president of South Africa to announce or to indicate the report of his envoys and what next step.
But I'm getting a sense that you are seeking deference from the UN Security Council to the regional and sub-regional efforts that are underway in terms of, whether you're talking about whatever conflict that's being addressed in the region, this one specifically about Ethiopia. You're saying to the international community, let us deal with this first and we'll let you know if we need your help.
No,
right?
This is an established, understood mechanism of the role of the continental organization, sub-region. Look what the Council did when the problem erupted in Mali. ECOWAS went in, and the Council said, let's wait and see what ECOWAS does. When the problem erupted in Lesotho, SADC went in, the Council says, let's see what is happening. So it is an established mechanism. IGAD played a role in the emergence of the transition in Sudan. So we take a strong view on the role of this sub-regional organization, especially as they mature with time, have capacities, policy, and have determination to resolve the problem. We're not deferring anything, but I think it's the role of Security Council in the context of Chapter 8 of the Council to reinforce, to capacitate, and complement the work of sub-regional organization. It is that context that Security Council understood. And they're all, by the way, all of them without faith, America, Germany, France, everybody praised President Ramaphosa for taking this initiative. He praised the African leaders to move into this and deal with this question. So they're fair with this thing. They know we mean it. They know we'll be transparent with the outcome. They know we'll be there now and forever. So Security Council really have come to understand the role of the AU in resolving conflict. They know we have the capacity, infrastructure, and everything to deal with this conflict. And we are sure this problem will be dealt with satisfactorily going forward.
So, Ambassador, the Council has a number of files that it deals with: Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, the DRC, Mali, South Sudan, Palestine, many other tough files. But I want to talk a bit about Libya, given South Africa's role. You mentioned our role in the Council in 2011 in terms of green-lighting the no-fly zone that eventually led to Gaddafi's ouster and killing, and your subsequent struggle to reassert Africa's role in resolving that conflict. How would you characterize where we find ourselves on the Libya file today?
I must say things have changed quite a lot now than it was 9 years, 10 years ago. Now, Security Council understand the critical role of AU, of the neighboring countries. And that's why from time to time, Secretary General does talk with President Cyril Ramaphosa about what do we do. From time to time, Security Council asks the A3+1, what is your view on doing this question? From time to time, we see the joint efforts by Secretary General Guterres, Chairperson Faki, or we see their ASGs and Commissioner Shegi in Libya thing. Now we have agreed, that we work together in taking Libya forward. We agreed that they can appoint an envoy and a coordinator who will be an African, work closely with the envoy to be chosen. We agreed that the Secretary General Security Council will take on board the views and the roles of the neighbors. Now lately, the neighbors, Tunisia, Morocco, and Egypt have been hosting inter-Libyan dialogue. This is very important for us. Now they've agreed that the AU will play a role through the process led by President Sassou Nguesso. We call it Brazzaville process towards reconciliation summit of Libyan people. So everybody knows that if the AU brings to bear, if the AU contributes, we move closer. And this actually have energized the Libyan parties. They met for the first time inside Libya to discuss the military arrangements, to discuss the issue of ceasefire, the return of foreign fighters. What do we do? How do we open up the roads between the cities? How do we make sure there is inter-Libyan flights moving? How do you open up corridors for humanitarian assistance? How do you remove the landmines around the cities? And are reaching even agreeing on the timetable going forward. Now, these are the efforts because the Security Council have realized that, yes, there was a very important meeting in Berlin, far-reaching decisions, but the continent matters. His voice matters. His role matters.
I want to ask you, Ambassador, let me just jump in. I want to ask you about Nikolay Mladenov. South Africa had blocked his appointment because you were Pretoria was seeking the appointment of an African to lead the United Nations mission in Libya. Certainly in terms of my understanding. You have now relented. It looks like Mladenov will be appointed. What was your opposition to Nikolay Mladenov taking that position at the beginning?
You know, the A3+1, the African Union, and Africans as a whole, 5 countries make a statement. Do not overlook the 1.3 billion people in Africa when you appoint envoys in Africa. We have capable, matured leaders who can tow this role. Why always overlook them? Why don't you assign them this task? Those are principal statements taken by the Africans to say, look, we are the first on the ground. 80% of peacekeeping in Africa is Africans. But when you come to these high-level positions to resolve conflicts, you go outside the continent. Please don't undermine the capacity of the Africans to lead peace processes, to be envoys. We make that statement. And after that, I think the Africans said, look, they heard us, we make our point. But because the Libyans are saying, we are reaching a very critical political process. Please, let's have an envoy. We Africans will say to the Libyan, okay, we'll be with you, we'll support you. Because we felt we have made a statement. And actually, Secretary General, and the Security Council said, but Africans, we understand you. It is true, we'll do things better next time. I think it's very, very important to make that statement once and for all, so that he paved the way. You know, South Africans always look ahead. We set agenda for the ahead. So we thought that as we exit Security Council 31st of December midnight, at least they should know that the Africans feel so much about their own people being granted. I mean, to not appoint the former foreign minister of Nigeria, such a very distinguished, highly distinguished South African diplomat.
Who blocked it?
Well, in the council, we normally...
I heard it was 14 in favor and 1 council member tried to block it. Do you want to go on the record?
No. Normally, we don't do that in the council. Because you see, we have the future ahead. We know who they are. But the same people, tomorrow, they will do something positive. So in diplomacy, we don't name and shame. No?
Name and shame. All right, let's move on, Ambassador. If there was one issue that South Africa was most vocal on in the Council, you know, besides Libya, besides the DRC or South Sudan, it's been the Palestinian question. You've spoken, you've lectured, you've reprimanded, but the needle has not shifted towards Palestinian independence. Where does the fault lie, in your view, for this spectacular lack of progress?
You know, Sherwin, Palestine is at the heart of South Africans. The self-determination of Palestinian people is embodied in the South African political DNA. It's something that we feel so strong about. So it was a duty in the Security Council to always be their voice, always amplify their aspirations, always ask the colleagues to understand that Palestine have been squeezed and squeezed. If you look at the geography of Palestine and go back to 1967, they've lost so much territory. So we tried our level best, but of course, our friends in Israel also have very strong supporters who believe and see things differently towards peace. And it is in these kind of circumstances that where we think as developing countries, non-aligned movement and similar thinking countries, that we need to push and push. But unfortunately, as we will exiting at the end of the year, I must admit, currently now, Palestine is worse off than it was a while ago. More land has been taken, more settlement has been built, more has been destroyed, more people have been killed, economy destroyed. But we don't get tired as South Africans. These kind of things give us energy to shoulder on. But we believe that international community will not support continuous annexation of Palestine. We believe that next year we will see the International Conference on Palestine as asked for by President Ahmad Baboud of Palestine. And I think that the new administration in the US may reset some of the policy decisions that has been taken before, like opening up a Palestinian office in DC, like putting more energy on the formally agreed parameters for resolving Palestine.
And a different posture perhaps on settlements, right? There's a vast difference between what the Obama administration was seeking to do on settlements when it left the council in 2016 and the incoming administration, well, now the outgoing administration of Donald Trump.
Well, as you said, we hope that there will be confidence-building measures. And some of these CBMs may say, let's free settlement, let's free political prisoners, let's go back to negotiations, let's find a way of dealing together more broadly on the broader Middle East issue. We hope there's going to be the reset of the situation. And we hope that if this happens, there will be a momentum now towards the resolution of Palestinian question.
So part of South Africa's foreign policy ambassador and the AU certainly includes silencing the guns by 2020. The Secretary General's call earlier this year for a global ceasefire due to COVID-19 has had mixed results. It's clear that this 2020 deadline is not going to be met. Where does that leave us?
What it brings us to is that at least in 2020, we have relative peace in Sudan, South Sudan, CAR, in Guinea-Bissau. We have relative peace in the DRC, albeit the eastern three states. We have peace in Burundi. So what it says to us is that although we don't have literally guns being silent on the continent, but the big area of the continent is enjoying relative peace. You get Central Africa, the eastern part of the DRC, there's a rapprochement now between the DRC, Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda. Look at East Africa. Somalia now is on the road towards elections early next year. Look at Sudan. We're now going to implement a new mandate, political mandate, UNITAMS, and they're going to continue with the roadmap towards hopefully elections in the next 18 months. We're going to have elections CAR in December. So at least the continent is moving more and more towards one person, one vote, or election, as against pulling the trigger. But we believe that it was very important for the UN also to pronounce and concretely say, this is what we can do to make sure that the guns are silent in the African continent.
Talk a bit, Ambassador, let me jump in about the relationship between the African Union and the United Nations. You know, if an African member of the Council becomes president, inevitably there will be a debate on the relationship and cooperation between the African Union and the United Nations. How do you see that relationship moving forward, given the difficulties you personally have experienced in terms of the lack of agreement around predictable financing for AU peace support operations? The AU has sought to have predictable financing from the UN's assessed contributions, but that has led to some stumbling blocks between the AU and the African Union. Just speak to that, if you will.
Actually, the relationship between the AU and the UN has strengthened with the Secretary General Guterres. Every year he has announced concrete measures to strengthen that bond. is continuously in contact with our President Ramaphosa, with the Faki, and various African leaders. This continuous telediplomacy has never been there before. So we see that it's bearing fruits. And also see his Assistant Secretary Generals, either his peacekeeping operation Lahua or peace support operation, our friend from India, Atul Kari, or political affairs, Di Carlo, and our commissioners are always working together. It has been strengthened. Now, the issue of financing African peacekeeping is in Africa. When we tabled the resolution last year, you recall, we advised that we should not go ahead because Africa still have to do certain internal discussion, modality of disbursement. So it's an African issue. It's not a United Nations Security Council. It is we in Africa to complete what we did not complete 3-4 years ago in terms of what do we do with the funds, how do we manage it, how dispense it, the rules, etc., etc. So we have not done that in the continent. And we do hope as South Africa that the continent will come together and complete that chapter. Because as we are still waiting, more and more money is being collected from member states. So the peace fund is growing, but there is no disbursement. So unfortunately, in this one, it is not the blame of UN. We in the continent, as Africans, we need to complete our own part and develop the modalities, the rules, the procedure, accountability, monitoring of how the fund will be disbursed and managed.
Finally, Ambassador, you've now served almost 2 years on the Council. You have 4 weeks to go. We are no closer to seeing a reformed United Nations Security Council. Intergovernmental negotiations have become more of a talk shop that literally is teetering on irrelevance. Where's the red line in the sand for South Africa?
Well, what do we have so far? Now we have agreed to have one single outcome document in the IGN.
So you've agreed on text-based negotiations, is that what you mean?
Secondly, that document, we are moving now early the beginning of 2021, that it will serve as the basis for a text-based negotiation. Third, we said on 2 years, reflect properly the overwhelming support by over so many members of United Nations on the African position as stated in Azulini Consensus and the Declaration. So that is being reflected, it's going to be reflected.
Let's remind our viewers, right, the Azulini Consensus calls for at least two permanent African seats with all the privileges afforded a permanent member, 5 additional African seats on a non-permanent basis, and an expanded council of 26 members. Do I have that right?
Fantastic.
But we're not moving.
Well, now, if you look at the last document, consolidated document, we can see we've pushed the file forward. What is left, I think, is some few members of the council to agree that after 75 years, there is no way we can exclude Africa from decision making. We have proved in the Security Council that we can be responsible. We have proved that we can contribute to peace and security. We have proved with our soldiers, police, that we can even put our daughters and sons on the ground for this. I think we have illustrated as South Africa and many others that we are ready, capable to assume that responsibility.
The big issue here, Ambassador, if I may, is not so much the intergovernmental negotiations, right? You can come to an agreement in that process, and then the second step is that it needs to be signed off, correct me if I'm wrong, by the 5 permanent members of the Council. Do you see that happening?
That's what the debate is. The debate is, for instance, UK and France say, no, we're ready for the reform. We need Africans to be there. So you're clearly getting this voice. So we hope very soon USA, China, Russia will not say we support. They will say we support 2 permanent members for Africa, 5 non-permanent members. We hope we'll hear that voice from next year.
Surely you can handle the BRICS members. You're a member of BRICS. China and Russia should be a no-brainer.
Well, they support, but what we need as Africans is to be explicit.
Right.
To be open about this support. I mean, if it's to France and UK, they are very open about it. And these are former colonial countries, but they are very forthright, though we need to support the Africans because they can see how much we've contributed towards peace in the African continent. So we hope that very soon the P5 will say, colleagues, time has come. Let's allow the Africans to come in. We need their voice, we need their energy, we need their capacity, we need political will to solve the African problem.
It's not just the Africans. Remember, it's the Asians and the Latin Americans and the South Americans. It's not just Africa. But as always...
But at least there is unanimity about Africa. There is no one dissenting voice. So we hope that at least one step can be taken to say, but the Africans have a...
Ever the optimist, Jerry Matjila, as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherwin.
Jerry Matjila is South Africa's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York and presides over the Council as president for the month of December, which serves as the country's swan song to their 2-year term, which ends December 31st.